Hi, I'm Gloria Strode, and welcome to Straightforward. We are on an awesome journey today. My very special guest is Lula Lunsford Huff, our tax commissioner, but she's here today to talk to us about the Lunsford Family Legacy. And for those of us that grew up here in Columbus, we know the role that her family played in our community. Everything from services to civil rights, and it is truly an honor for having Lula here today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Well, this is going to be a part of an ongoing series, and just based on the time that you have to teach this history lesson. Today we're going to do 3 parts, and then we're going to have you come back at another time when your schedule permits. Those of us that grew up in Columbus, we know how rich your family history is. We could never get it probably all done in a year. It's just so much from your grandmother, your parents, and even yourself today. So I want you to start with one of the main things, explaining your family, your grandmother, and the big difference that she made. Of course, I wanted to share her being featured in this book, if we can get a shot of that as well. And she's actually on the opposite page of John Amos. So for those of us that's been around from children growing up, we know the difference that Miss Lizzie made in our community. So just want you to start off talking about the matriarch, and then we're going to move down to your dad, who just carried the torch, and your mom, and of course now you're carrying it today. So share something with us about Grandma and her vision.
All right, I'll do that. And I'd like to point out here that this particular publication that you're viewing here is the 100 most influential people to remember, that was published by the Ledger Enquirer, and I think that was back in 2000. It was a special publication, and it was the first time that I actually took time to sit down and write something about our history, and most of it had been oral, and there were pieces of it here and there, and so this made it come together. But to really tell you about my family, because we're very private, very humble people, I'd have to share with you that primarily, if I were to describe us, I'd say that we're a very humble family.
And I would agree with that.
And I would say that we're a Christian family that believes in God first, and everything else is guided by Him. Very close-knit. Ethics and morals are top on the priority of who we are. No nonsense kind of guidance that has been handed down to us, and definitely workaholics.
Absolutely.
And there's always been the philosophy, especially by my mother, Sally, who would always tell us as kids coming up that we were no better than anyone else. And we've never thought anything any different from that, and probably didn't realize how blessed we really were until we did have some burnings of crosses on our yards and some hateful phone calls being made to us, and at the death of my grandmother, the patriarch, that people began to tell us what she and my family had been doing for others, that
you all just took it for granted because that was what you all did.
Exactly, and that's what you were supposed to do. And from that, I'd like to share with you how these things actually happened, because most of the time, if we talk about anyone in my family, it's primarily her.
Right.
And that's because her husband, Watson Lunsford, was a quiet gentleman who let her have the forefront, but was there for her.
Yes.
And it's interesting in the dynamics of how Columbus grew that most young people believe that Fort Benning has always been where it is.
Right.
And that's not true. Originally, when the federal government was contemplating a location for a base around World War II's time frame, They were looking primarily for availability of land, and they were looking for the climate.
Okay.
And actually, Columbus was in the forefront of the running for this. They chose what was the old Columbus Square. Okay,
wow. Okay.
Which is interesting enough as to where I work at right
exactly.
now, right?
Now you're back at the original place. Yes.
There you go. That did not last very long because they needed a larger area, and they did a bombardment of firing out there, and so they needed the shooting ranges for that.
Okay.
And as a result of that, they began to look further, and they moved to their current location where they are now. Now, what's important about that is that my grandfather, Lizzie Lunsford's husband, my grandmother's husband, lived there.
Okay.
And so they started buying up the land there, and as a result of that, he moved. Well, when he moved downtown. Well, what we consider downtown now, okay?
Right.
And what's important there is that that was the hub of the black community, all right, which is called the Bottom, which is actually the bottom of Winton Road, what's called MLK Boulevard now, coming straight across the Casita Road, going down towards Veterans. That's why you have the black cemetery there.
Porterdale.
Okay. And also the Slave Cemetery is located right down there on 6th Avenue. Spencer High School, our first black high school, was there on 10th Avenue. And so all of those things were in that proximity.
Right.
And most blacks lived there, and it was their downtown area.
It was our Mecca.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. If you were to go back to Columbus, Georgia's 150th history that's written in there, it talks about the original layout of Columbus. And it will talk about from Front Avenue all the way over to 10th Avenue. Streets were named different than what they are today.
Right.
But it included basically that entire area from Front Avenue over to 10th Avenue, except for there was a dividing line of Veterans Parkway, which was once then 4th Avenue, that the whites had from Front over to 4th, and the blacks had a downtown area from 4th over to 10th Avenue.
Okay, well, we're going to hold that thought. We're going to take a break, go to some of our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
We'll be right back after word from some of our sponsors.
Columbus's first New York-style buffalo wings restaurant. American Deli is not only known for the best buffalo wings in the area, they're also known for their fresh deli ingredients. Now you can enjoy the best New York-style buffalo wings in 2 locations. American Deli at 2004 Auburn Avenue, Columbus, Georgia, and American Wings and Deli at 2061 Highway 280 in Phoenix City. We're open Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Sunday from noon to 8 p.m. American Deli, the best buffalo wings around.
Straightforward is brought to you by ERA Elite Ventures Realty and Management Company. Always there for you. Call Kia and Travis Chambers. And welcome back to Straightforward. Today we have a very special guest, Lula Lunsford Huff, our tax commissioner. But today she's here to share wonderful, wonderful history about the Lunsford Family Legacy. And for those of us that grew up here in Columbus, we know that you could always depend on Mr. Lunsford. He always was there to stand in the gap, whether it was for business or for civil rights. So we're going to continue the conversation. You were giving us a little history before we went to the break on Fort Benning and the connection with your family, property, and now we're going to move on to how Fort Benning connects to another project that your family put in place for soldiers.
Okay. Well, now it's important to realize that in the bottom area down there, that's where my grandmother and grandfather met. Okay. And each of them had a grocery store. And so when my grandmother died, they got married. But the important thing about that was that when they sold things in their grocery store, which was down in that bottom area that we're talking about, there was no such thing as a pound. It was a pound plus. There was no such thing as a dozen. It was 13.
Right.
And people knew that they could come in and bring their groceries and actually use that, not bring their groceries, but bring the vegetables out of their gardens. If they couldn't pay for their goods they got, then instead he would allow them to bring that in for credit.
Really?
So no one in the neighborhood ever went
without
for
anything. Right.
And it was an open door policy. And that was part of their giving nature that they had. Well, during, I guess, well, let me say a couple of things.
Okay.
My grandmother never had a college education, and my grandfather never did. And what they did was, through reading and a desire to strive to do more and to be better. Okay, so as a result of that grocery store and their savings and their ventures in real estate, even back then, their two kids both were sent off to college.
Okay.
Now, what's important about this is 1940s. Okay. My aunt, my dad's sister, Lula, who I'm named after, went to Howard University and graduated from there in Washington, D.C. My father went to Fisk University and graduated from there. She paid for their education. There was no scholarship.
There was no student loans.
No, there wasn't any student loan.
It was by the sweat of her brow.
That's exactly right, by the two of them. And so that's important for this particular time period, despite the fact that she didn't have that education, and despite the fact that both of them went to Spencer High School. Okay, and so that's important. From that same standpoint, Spencer High School was built primarily because a group of individuals got together and went to the school board and said, you know, we've requested time and time again that we need a high school for blacks to go to. If you wanted to go further in school back then, you had to go to Tuskegee, Fort Valley, or to Atlanta to go to high school.
Right.
So they finally insisted on doing that as a result of a petition, and it was my grandfather, Watson Lunsford, who was one of the signers on that petition to get Spencer High School built down there. And then there were some columns and some pillars that were on the front of Spencer High School that originally stood there, for those that can remember that back there. They had a time capsule. Unfortunately, it was lost when it was torn down.
Oh my goodness.
His graduating class put things down into that capsule, and they actually laid the bricks for those two brick columns that were down there. And I wish Roscoe Chester was around, because he was
a great
part of that,
historian.
and he was part of that.
Yes.
Okay, so that initial part of it. Well, with World War II coming about, well, I guess, let's see, I was trying to stay in sequential order, but I don't know. Yeah, okay, that'll work. Okay, 1941. Okay. All right. With World War II, bringing in soldiers, there was the 24th Infantry. For the young folks that don't know, it was all black soldiers.
Yes.
And I hope I can show you a picture here that very quickly. Here we go.
Okay.
That's the 24th Infantry at Doughboy Stadium. Okay.
Yeah.
Right there. And what was important about that was that these soldiers had nowhere to go for recreation or anything, because the Army wasn't integrated. Right. So that, yes, you had an officers club for the white soldiers, but you had nothing for the black soldiers back then. Well, E.E. Farley, who was a developer, a black developer, and in fact he built the first black area in Columbus for housing development, which was Carver Heights.
Carver Heights.
We know that, don't we?
Exactly. That's where we're from, that part of town.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He came to my grandmother and told her about this need that we had in the community, and asked her to respond to it. And that she did. As I said, she was a very, very giving person. And as a result of that, she was convinced to build the first and only black USO in the world.
In the world.
In the world for soldiers. And this is a picture of it here. And you might not be able to pick up on it. This was July 28, 1941.
1941, July 28th. Oh, that's awesome.
And that's her sitting right back here in the back. The picture is a little dark for you to see.
Okay, but that is your grandmother.
Yes.
Sitting right here, this way.
Yes.
Right there.
That would have been her right there.
Okay.
And it's interesting because back then it was just called, it was a Negro Army Navy Y, okay, which was the same thing as the USO, which it's referred to in there as. But there were about 5,000 Negro/black soldiers that took advantage of it during that point in time. Now, as a result of this, my father has always been an entrepreneur, and he was very much interested in, he was an entrepreneur, so he was interested in making money and better, making things better. So while she was doing this, there is a building that's attached to it. And if you can, this is a picture of the Pierce building. My grandmother's brother was Richard Pierce, and for those from that time period, they would know that they called him Dick. And I'll move this out of the way. But this is at the corner of 9th Street and 5th Avenue. It's still there today, and it's called Magic Corner, because this is where all the excitement took place.
So was this where they held events upstairs, dress up, formals,
You
parties,
got it.
entertainment?
You got it. It was 3 floors. Downstairs they had, let's see, they had a doctor's office, they had a dentist's office, they had a haberdashery.
Really?
They had a pharmacist, they had a drugstore, they had a cafeteria. In fact, not a cafeteria, a restaurant. My mother opened up a restaurant that was called the Annex. And the drugstore was on one side and the Annex was on the other side. The USO was connected. Got another picture. Here we go. This is the USO here, if you can get that one. Can you pick that one up?
Yeah.
Okay, the USO was adjacent to the Pierce building. So that the USO was facing 5th Avenue. The Pierce building was facing 9th Street, and the side of it was on 5th Avenue, And
so that was our hub where we had everything that we needed right down in the bottom, which is now we're calling the Liberty District and all of that.
Exactly.
Okay, well, I want you to hold that point. We're going to go to a break with our sponsors, and we'll be right back after word from some of our sponsors. This has been a special edition of Straightforward. If you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything. Until next time, be blessed.